So just quick introduction. My name is Mark Petrosoniak. I'm Toronto-based. My role is, Richard mentioned, Senior Manager of Strategy and Business Operations at Gatik. We're an autonomous vehicle company for B2B short-haul logistics. I support on the strategic initiative side of things, partnerships, business development, and business operations related items. I spent 10 years at Accenture in management consulting, where I focus predominantly on supply chain, working with clients across retail, CPG, and industrial manufacturing. What I'd like to do is spend a few minutes just introducing the panel. So I'll pass it off to, why don't we start with Wayne? And Wayne, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Looks like I'm having the same issue with my camera. Oh, there we go. Just different. I had a different camera. I had a web monitor I put in the other day. Apologize. My name is Wayne Scott. I work for Loblaw. I've been there since 2007. I've been in this industry now probably going on about 35 years. Starting back at the Freightliner dealership as a mechanic, and then working my way through the industry, managing fleets predominantly, and then in the last 7 years I've been at Loblaw taking care of the maintenance and procurement and innovation throughout the fleet, the over-the-road fleet. So we've been doing this a long time.
All right, thanks Wayne, appreciate that introduction. Why don't we hand it off to Saiedeh to introduce herself.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for inviting me. Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's good morning. My name is Saiedeh Razavi, and I'm the director of McMaster Institute for Transportation and Logistics, or MITL. I'm also an associate professor at the Department of Civil Engineering and a chair in heavy construction at McMaster University. I come from a multidisciplinary background with formal education in computer engineering with a bachelor degree, a master's degree in artificial intelligence, and a PhD degree in civil engineering. Over the last 15 years, I've worked on projects on smart mobility, smart infrastructure, construction, and supply chain. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Saiedeh, appreciate it. And our other panelist, Khelil, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Khelil. I'm the manager of business and development at Purolator. As you know, Purolator is part of the Canada company. In reality, I joined Purolator from 23 years ago, and mostly working on enterprise projects regarding IT, finance, and in 2014, I decided to launch the first R&D department at Purolator. Why? Because we need to introduce new innovative solutions for our supply chain. Purolator is, let me say, seeing a lot of growth from the last at least 10 years, and due to the fact that we are the biggest network across Canada, means that we need to be also the leader in terms of innovation for Courier Express company. In terms of background, I used to work as a consultant for the World Bank in Africa. So far, I'm continuing to work as an external consultant, but I'm graduated in Master in Business Administration from UQAM in Montreal with a specialty in logistics and transportation. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, guys, and appreciate you guys joining today out of your busy day. We're here to talk about the movement of goods and transition to autonomous operations. So as everyone likely is on the calls knows, it's a very exciting time right now where we're seeing consumer expectations changing from 1 to 2 day deliveries to same-day deliveries. We're seeing a massive increase in e-commerce. Networks are changing at a rapid rate, where hubs are moving closer to the consumers, and we're seeing that impacts on the retail network, CPG networks, etc. And we're also seeing new types of fulfillment. So, for example, micro fulfillment centers, e-commerce fulfillment centers, customer fulfillment centers, all these different types of names that people are coming up with. But at the end of the day, it's getting those hubs closer to the end consumer for improved service levels. So, you know, it's an exciting time for the industry, and we're seeing, you know, more and more automation of transportation networks, like we've seen in the past decade, where we saw warehousing automation really ramp up. So the scope of the discussion today is really to look at the trends of anything autonomous logistics related, talking about the trends and technologies, talking about the implications on labor, as well as the implications for government and the societal impacts as well. So let's jump into it. My first question is around the trends and technology side of things. So I'll go around the panel and ask each one of you guys this question. But let's start with Wayne. What trends and technologies have initiated the transformation of the goods movement sector? And could you speak to some of the primary autonomous use cases and shine a light on the factors that have pushed these to the forefront?
Thanks. It's a big question. I think what we've seen in the last few years is, you know, a lot of this was in test cases a few years back. And if you take a look now, you can actually see where, you know, it's come to fruition. You know, we take a look at the project that we're doing with yourselves. 3 years ago, we did another one. Didn't work out as well. So we've had a lot of learnings in the last few years. The Gatik project that we've got now with you, I mean, we've got our first one, you know, out there. We've got 4 more, looking at other class of vehicles as well. And I think that's only going to get larger and larger. The last presenter, he came up on, you know, the small delivery vehicles for urban downtown centers, colleges, universities, so on and so forth. As you can see, that trend go, you know, more as, you know, people, you know, through this pandemic have turned around and transferred more online than they've done any other time. I mean, it's been a 2 and 3x growth in the last 12 months. So I think that's really pushed along a lot of this autonomous technology. In the next few years, I see the level 4 growing, of course. Level 5, you know, we're still 10 years out minimum, I believe, on that. Just from what I've seen from different companies and different people that I've talked to around. But I think the B2B, the short haul, final mile, you know, still looking for a Class 8 vehicle that we can pilot up in Canada. Not too many of them around right now. But I also do believe that it will be there shortly. We're still looking at that as well. But I think that's where level 4, B2B, short haul technology is going in the next few years.
Thanks, Wayne. And same question to you, Saiedeh, around the trends and technologies that you're seeing in this space.
I would like to actually start with some of the most recent trends and technologies. We know that with recent disruptions of COVID, or let's say the pandemic, we're facing more trade-offs between supply chain cost efficiency and globalization for resiliency, reliability, and agility. So this new momentum has accelerated changes in technology, consumer behavior, and policy, which is a good thing for all of us that we're working on this smart or intelligent mobility or supply chain of the future. This acceleration was to respond to the continuous uncertainty in supply chain and demand and it resulted in more digitization, automation, and decarbonization, and also more intelligence. And these changes are likely to stay with us in the post-pandemic world. So they're not going to go away. So let's start with saying that, for example, we have cities that have recently developed new mobility regulations and priorities that they're not going to go away that easily. For example, more than 150 cities around the world have restricted access to private vehicles, and then also have changed their transportation infrastructure and redefined them to include bike lanes or more active transportation opportunities. We know that European Union leaders just recently raised the CO2 reduction target from 40% to 55% in 2030. And we've heard that California will ban the sale of new passengers cars and pickup trucks with internal combustion engine by 2035. So these are all disruptors that we're accelerated recently just because of the disruptor we faced, which was the COVID-19 pandemic. Another wave of accelerated change comes from the consumer behavior. By the raising expectations and limitless purchasing opportunities, and also increasingly turning into digital channels, consumers are drivers for these changes. So other nodes of supply chain, such as retailers, manufacturers, third-party logistics companies, and others, have to catch up by producing more and in a shorter turnaround and by improving visibility and transparency. We will also see more autonomous vehicles moving goods. We saw in Corey's presentation earlier today, robots and drones in factories and warehouses, sensors and actuators to maintain inventory management, heating, lighting, and intelligence to support the planning and control of our supply chain. An example is Amazon's patented system for shipping demand. Amazon literally ships goods before we even purchase them. By predicting or having the intelligence to predict supply and demand in advance, they enable themselves to ship goods to customers in a shorter time and in lower cost. And I don't take that much of your time, but just it's worth maybe to mention some examples of autonomous mobility are not limited to just autonomous cars. We have autonomous, obviously mobile robots, drones in warehouses. We have store robots that aid in replenishment. We have autonomous long haul trucks and last mile delivery trucks. But we also have autonomous freight trains and autonomous cargo ships, which maybe are considered the latest in the pool. Thank you. Back to you, Mark.
Great insights, Saiedeh. Appreciate that, and I'm sure the audience did too. Over to you, Khelil, to talk about this, the trends and technologies that you're seeing and what you think we're looking to in the future.
In reality, the autonomous vehicle or this type of solution will help us in two areas, especially for our industry. The first one is the shortage in terms of drivers, because so far we have a very huge issue to recruit people in order to drive our trucks, especially during the peak season. And doing the autonomous delivery will help a lot, and even the robots to assist even our, for example, food courier drivers. This is exactly what we are testing in Montreal, and we'll be testing very shortly in Toronto. It will increase our productivity, but in the same time, it will reduce the pressure in terms of driver availability. The other aspect is the safety and security aspect. The safety aspect, for example, if I take the new hub we are constructing now in Toronto, we are talking about 403,000 square feet, and with many, let we say, people working there. We are talking about maybe 1,000 people working there, with all the jiggers, with all these, let we say, movement of freight inside these type of, let we say, facilities, will increase our exposure to a lot of safety concern, and autonomous vehicle can help reducing this type of, let we say, exposure and risk for our operation. Regarding the costs, we did study with the University of Toronto, for example, by using one of the shopping centers, and we complement, if you want, our delivery driver there with an autonomous, let we say, delivery system. Guess what? That we reached the same, let we say, saving as Corey is indicating on his presentation. We're talking about 30 to 40% saving. Saving is very important. Why? Because with the COVID pressure, what we saw a balance, a complete balance. That means we had exactly 100 degrees change. For example, Purolator in March, we are doing more B2B than B2C. 80% of our freight movement is B2B. When we start closing and doing all that COVID restrictions, we turn from 20% B2C to 80% B2C. That means is a huge change for us. Huge change. We cannot, let we say, deal with it with the current, let we say, supply chain built for B2B with all the costs. You know, when we are talking about e-commerce, the margin is very thin. That's why if the autonomous robot can help us to reduce this type of cost, this is exactly where I think most of the Courier Express company are going to. In order to reduce, we need to use this type of solution. But this is the two, in reality, or three main areas where I see the future trend in terms of using more this type of solution.
Great, thanks. And I know you mentioned this, or you kind of hit on this answer, in your first one, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the labor implications, and we'll start with you, Khelil. But what does the migration of labor-based services to autonomous operations look like? And if you can share your thoughts on specific impacts that you've seen or that you expect to see, and interested to hear your thoughts, either on the micro level that we're seeing in Ontario, or even, at a more macro level, for example, at North America or global scale.
In reality, for the labor impact and the labor-based service to autonomous operation, we need to keep in mind that many of our organizations are unionized organizations. For example, here, in the context of Purolator, we cannot move. It's not very easy move from, let we say, labor-based to autonomous, let we say, operation without the approval or agreement of our, let we say, union. I don't see it, or I don't see that move to happen very quickly. It will be by phase, or it will be progressive. Why? Because we need to understand first where to implement this type of autonomous activity. And most of the autonomous activity will really replace some repetitive, let we say, activity. Second thing, where, for example, there is no need of, in terms of manpower, or, for example, there is no availability of the manpower. We talk about drivers, for example, for in our sector. But to be honest with you, I see autonomous activity as a complement for what we have so far, due to the fact that the way that the labor is organized in Canada and North America, it will be a lot of roadblocks before, for example, company like Purolator to move to full autonomous, for example, parcel delivery or last mile delivery. It's the case everywhere, I think, in North America. If you take UPS is unionized. FedEx, part of the FedEx is unionized. I'm talking about our industry. The same thing for Canada Post. I want to give you just an example. For example, in Europe, they tried to introduce the Follow Me robot to assist and help their mail people, and the union refused to introduce that. That's why the migration from labor-based to autonomous operation need to take into consideration the labor condition, the labor legislation, but also it need to be introduced as a complement for what the organization are doing.
Great, thanks for that. Over to you, Saiedeh, on what you're seeing from a labor impacts or labor implications and relating to autonomy.
We kind of discussed that autonomous vehicles, robots, AI, machine learning are the key enablers of our future supply chain, or better to call it our autonomous supply chain of the future. It's important to note that these disruptions are happening at a larger scale and faster pace than the human can easily adapt with. And this is a study proven that human adoption rate is slower than what the technology is happening right now. So it's only natural to fear these disruptors and be worried if people will be displaced out of work because of automation. That's one of the main concerns when it comes to the workforce of the future and autonomy. So let me just, to calm this fear, let me just encourage people to think back in 1850s when Otis You know that name through all the elevators probably, right? Otis introduced safety elevator in 1850s. After that, you know, that widespread fear about using elevators are too dangerous went away. So then we had the acceptance of vertical transportation. And later on in 1894, I believe, they started the first autonomous or driver operated or driverless elevator, which might be the first instance of autonomous vehicle around in the history. So what Otis in fact helped was created was to help societies to reach higher elevation in city development and growth. So these driverless elevators displaced the work of operators, but created work in many other areas such as electrical and mechanical manufacturing and support for elevators. But way much beyond that, they created job and opportunities in other sectors such as construction, real estate, city building, city planning, and they created significant socioeconomical impact by allowing cities to develop and grow. So here we are. When we think about the future of supply chain being autonomous, let's remind ourselves about the workforce that were displaced, but then what happened, all the opportunities happened. So the same as many others, I also believe that the future of goods or goods movement will have a low degree of human intervention. But in this shift, the nature of work will be replaced. The people will not. So in the future supply chain environment, employees are less encumbered with unsafe and repetitive tasks and will have more opportunities to contribute to innovation and decision making. And that's the beauty of the future in that autonomous environment. They will need to be integrated and will be required to have a wide breadth of knowledge and skills to contribute to decision making, as opposed to the traditional deep skill sets in a particular area and lack of ability for making decisions. Another important capability needed for the future workforce and what is needed for us to keep us ready for the future is that we need to have, the future workforce need to have high ability to adapt and thrive in an environment of change. We have faced it today. Lots of changes from our moderator, and Mark just showed agility and high adaptability to just step in and take this opportunity to all those technical challenges. And this is what we're going to see. So we need a lot of high adaptability quotient, or AQ, for our future workforce. I think I'll stop here. Mark, back to you.
All right, thanks, Saiedeh. That's just for the sake of time. I'll pass it off to Wayne to address the labor question and what the implications of that of autonomous operations has on that the future of the workforce.
Great, thank you. You know, there's a substantial shortage of drivers in the workforce right now, regardless. I mean, if you take a look at Canada, the baby boomer population is coming out. You know, people are not getting back into that driver role, that long haul driver role, or the short haul. They want to be home every day. People are changing the way they want to do and react. When I started in this industry, it wasn't uncommon for somebody to, get in a truck and go away for 2-3 weeks at a time and come home for a weekend and leave again. People want, better time, work family balance. They want to be home every night. So I think that as as Saiedeh said, as people are coming in, as this technology comes up on an S curve, I think what you're going to see is as the drivers now are getting out of the industry, this will take over a little bit of the industry. And then as that S curve hits the top, regardless of what year that's going to be, we'll have to adapt depending on the rate of change and technology and how people will actually accept the change. I mean, if you take a look at with you, Mark, with Gatik, I mean, our vehicle will be driverless come later this year on public streets. I'm just waiting for the first phone call and how we're going to address that as this drives down Steeles Avenue. And the adaptive change, I think, is going to be, based on that. Are we going to get kickback? Are we going to get, are people going to come back? Are people going to try to hit the vehicle just to see if they can? Will it stop? I think people are a little apprehensive about the technology right now. If you read any of the studies that I've seen, 70 to 75% of people still are reluctant to get into a fully autonomous vehicle, let alone seeing an autonomous Class 8 drive down the road at 80,000 pounds. There's a couple books, an author, Tony Seba, not too sure if you've heard of him before, but he does transportation disruption, S-curves, and the whole bit. And one of his presentations, he had the picture of 1905, I think it was New York City, and there was all horse and buggy and one car. 10 years later, it's a great picture, same corner, same everything, all cars, one horse and buggy. As New York grew, I mean, there's no horse and buggies anymore. Like, he's probably a tourist. But if you take a look at that, they were able to change, adapt, repurpose labor, so on and so forth. There's no horse and buggy, there's not a blacksmith on every corner anymore. So we've evolved, we've changed, people have gone from blacksmiths, buggy makers to cars, they've adapted and moved on to other businesses. So I think it's a few years out, but I think as drivers leave this industry and that baby boomer population, people don't want to get back into it. I think that, it's a good bend in that S-curve where some of this will take over from B2B and short haul.
Great. Thanks, guys, for those answers to the question. One thing I do want to do, just to remind the audience members, is to type in any questions that you have into the chat. We'll try to save a bit of time at the end. I'll get into one more question for the panelists, but please do share any questions that you have as we go. So I guess over to you, Wayne, again, around the government policy. So what role do you think governments can play in fostering advancements in autonomous technologies and operations?
Well, I know that I think it was 2009, I believe it was, Ontario turned around and put a 10-year plan out. I think they revised it several times since. As car manufacturers turn around and have level 3 on the road right now, people start getting used to it, whether it be the Teslas, anybody else in that model. Even in the Class 8 trucks right now, you can buy a Daimler-Benz or a Freightliner Western Star truck at level 3. So I think if people get more accustomed to that, and governments get used to it, they're a little slower to change than than what the industry will. But I think that as some very large companies turn around and, Alphabet, Google, everyone else, Tesla, as they start ramping this up, I think you'll see states that want this technology in their state, and they're going to change legislation faster than others. And I think you're going to get some that'll be very slow with it. They're reluctant to change based on their demographics, based on whatever. They might be, a couple of years behind. But I also think that states that do change it the fastest will get the biggest influx of new business, new growth. And I think that they're going to be pushing into it, but I think their constituents might just take a little bit of time.
Thanks, Wayne. Saiedeh, what role do you think governments can play in fostering advancements in autonomous operations?
First, we need to acknowledge that we cannot be future ready unless all levels of government work together and work together effectively. Governments also will need to collaborate with industry and research enterprises to create different design and operational guidelines and policies. These changes, or the role of government, can be summarized in the areas of roadway and transportation infrastructure, communication and digital infrastructure, data management, governance and standards, as well as consumer behavior and adaptation. So, which means we need to bring more public awareness and education to the public and engaging them in the process, which is very critical. But more importantly, the future of supply chain landscape will need skill sets related to new technologies and data analytics and new platforms, among others. So educating the new generation of skilled workers and professionals with the right set of skill sets will be the key for future success for our competitiveness, which governments need to be involved in that. So I just to wrap it up with saying that Canada has taken some really good steps for now so far, for being future ready for mobility landscape, such as a program such as this. Even we have MTO's CAV readiness plan and Transport Canada's ACAT program. However, I believe we need wider engagement, funding, and visibility, as well as some investment in some curriculum planning or micro-credential planning for more improvement in the state of the future readiness for Canada.
Khelil, any thoughts on this?
In reality, I echo the two comments from Wayne and from Saiedeh, because in reality, when we are talking about the autonomous, yes, we need to talk about legislation. Legislation is very important, and the most important thing, we don't want to see what's happening in electric vehicle. For example, we have federal legislation, and we have for each province has the freedom to do their own restriction and their own legislation. We need to have a standard legislation across the board, correct? So it will facilitate a lot the progress and the introduction of this, let me say, type of solution. Second thing, very important also, is the risk management. Risk management and sharing, because when he's talking about vehicle inside the street, okay, if we put autonomous, let me say, delivery robots inside the street, there is a risk, and that risk need to be shared with the, let me say, local authorities, but also with the organization using that type of, let me say, vehicle. I take as an example, for example, I think there is a problem last year with Starship with pedestrian, and it's creating a lot of problems. There is a lot of complaint from customers. That type of, let me say, risk need to be really well studied especially by academia, and for to educate the government when they are doing the legislation, and to ensure a good liability, let me say, program in order for us as a company to use the street and put autonomous vehicle on the street. The second element, I think Saiedeh mentioned it, is the infrastructure. Why infrastructure? Because when you put autonomous vehicle, think about the weather, think about the condition of the streets. We are launching electric e-bikes or cargo e-bikes, and we have a lot of problem with the quality of our streets. How about now we are putting autonomous robots? Cities need to be involved in terms of physical instruction, that means the roads and the streets, but in the same time, if we are using robot for, let me say, outdoor delivery, indoor delivery, there is no problem for the autonomous robots, very easy, very straightforward, let me say, usage of this type of technology, but for the indoor, for the outdoor, we have problem. Also, the smart cities, we need to have access to these smart cities in order for us also to use this type of technology. The last one, it's very important, and I'm taking the analogy with the electric vehicle, is the fact that when we talk about autonomous, yes, in some cases they are not very costly, but for example, when we use autonomous vehicle for example, like a tractor, autonomous line haul, or for example, to move our trailer inside the yard, like what Corey showed in the port, we have the same type of, let me say, usage in our yard to move these semi-trailers and to position them on the dock doors. This type of technology is very costly. If the government cannot help us with some subsidies, we cannot have access to this type of technology. That means the role of the government, especially in Canada, will remain very important to introduce this type of technology, and especially for us as a user to use them for our day-to-day activity.
Great. Thanks, guys. Maybe just another question that has come up from the audience is around, as we think about the evolution of autonomous operations, are there any early wins or any type of early wins around the return on investments that we can see or expect to see in the autonomous operations field before we go fully autonomous? Maybe Saiedeh, do you want to comment?
I would like to pass. Nothing comes to my mind other than saying that the early wins may not necessarily be in the economic aspect of things. It might be in the safety or intelligence that these systems will bring to the. So it's an investment for future.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So maybe it's not. If you're not taking the economic value approach, maybe there's a safety side of it, which translates indirectly to savings in other ways. Maybe Wayne, do you have any thoughts on this early wins as we kind of progress up that S curve that you mentioned earlier in the autonomous operations side of things?
The one thing we can take a look at right now is like there's no return on investment on an autonomous vehicle right now. The costs are great. We've still got drivers behind the wheels, and don't get me wrong, it's going to be years before we ever get to a point where we can allow these things to drive down the road. I think we'll get there. When that will be, I'm not sure. I think as far as the safety aspect of it, if you take a look at just that in itself, and that S curve that we talked about a little earlier, if you think that cars have been around for 120 years, and for the first 100, there really wasn't much improvement. They might have added cruise control in the early 70s, but in the last 20 years, I mean, you've got lane avoidance, you've got roll stability, you've got cruise control, you've got lane centering, you've got self-piloting, you've got lane keep. And considering that 94% of all accidents, based on NHTSA's, it's easy to get some of the numbers out of the NHTSA out of the U.S. than it is out of Canada. But if all accidents are driver, 94% of them have been deemed to be driver behavior. You take a look at some of the cars you've got now. As far as my wife's new car, and it's just a little Mazda CX-5, and it takes the ability away. You can't rear end anybody anymore. It stops you. And if you do rear end somebody, the ability to have the damage or the personal injury is considerably less. And I think those are the quick wins as this technology, rolls out in that S curve. Just look at your personal car. 20 years, it's come a long way.
Any thoughts on this, Khelil, in 10 seconds, and then I'll progress to it.
Exactly. In reality, there is two aspects. The first one is to go back to Wayne, is health and safety. Because, for example, if we put more delivery robots on the street, we will be reducing the exposure of our driver to injuries. And most of our injuries in terms of, let me say, deliveries coming from our driver, correct? Second element, very important, is the CO2 emission, because more autonomous delivery means what? Means less trucks or few trucks on the street. These two elements are very important for us, and there is for sure there is a cost associated to it, if it's in terms of CO2 emission or in terms of health and safety. Health and safety, for example, aspect it's cost us around $17 million per year in terms of accident and injuries. In addition to the fact that the driver will not be available for the next day delivery. Now autonomous delivery will play a big role in that part. And to go back to the question about the return on investment, yes, there is no a lot of study to indicate that, but I'm more than confident that if the autonomous solution will be put in the right context, for sure we'll see a very good and interesting return on investment.
Thanks. Saiedeh, over to you on what are some of the most dramatic societal impacts and shifts that we expect to see as a result of the shift from labor-based to autonomous operations?
I kind of alluded into that the future workforce will be will be away from mundane, repetitive, dangerous tasks. So we are increasing safety, we are increasing improvement for efficiency, but not just on the labor side, but on the business side. That means the businesses will be faster in delivering fulfillment and will be more efficient, will have higher profit, obviously at a cost of more capital investment and investment on their labor. I just want to emphasize that one of the main, the most dramatic shifts that I see, or the most dramatic societal impact that I see, is in the lies on human or people who are going to be involved, and the way that the workforce is going to be shifted, and the type of work and activities that's going to happen in the future in this domain.
Wayne, any final thoughts, and do you want to chime in on the society, the types of impacts that we can expect from a society in general?
You know, I think it's going to take a long time for this to get to fruition. I think what we're doing right now is we're seeing where we're doing the pilots with you, and we've got some other stuff in the works as well. But you know, people are changing, and industry's changing, and you know, we as a company has to keep up with it.
Khelil, any final thoughts, and what are your thoughts around the societal impacts of moving toward autonomous operations?
The social impact, it will be especially in terms of city development, because so far, if we take the example of City of Toronto, based on the new plans and the current plans and the future plan, first thing, we know that within the next few years, 3 of 5 residents will be located in cities. Means what? Means, for example, if I take again that example of Toronto, you will have a lot of high rising, and this is exactly what's happening now with all these high rising. I saw last 2 weeks a plan, future plan for Toronto. It will be a big concern for us. Why? Because most of the time we are trying to keep our product and service, and even the same thing for example, grocery stores and retail, to keep their service and product near the customer. And here, autonomous will play that type of, for example, for high rising, by using start shift or some that type of, let we say, technology, we can ease the type of, let we say, needs from the customer to have the product near, let we say, their location. For example, you have a robot to deliver to a high rising, and on the parking lot, in the underground, we can create fulfillment center, and from that fulfillment center, we can, for example, deliver products, if it's a grocery, if it's retail, if it's clothes, anything to that tower, let me say, that rising building. This type of, let me say, change in our cities, for sure we will see more need in terms of autonomous solution, for the simple reason that our drivers or our people cannot move now in the future in this type of new cities and new design of this. There is a huge impact of the autonomous, let me say, technology in the way even people will be living, or it will be, I can say, the reverse, in the way that people will be living will have a new impact on the autonomous solution. The impact will be positive in the fact that we will see a lot of increase in terms of usage of that type of solution in the near future, especially in mega cities like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and so on.
Okay, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists today to facilitate this discussion on movement of goods and the transition to autonomous operations. So thank you for sharing all your insights. Super interesting.